but I want to make use of all your time and honor the time you have. So I'd like to thank the panelists who joined today. Thank you so much for coming out and giving your time to talk about your work and how you've impacted criminal justice in the Springs area in the past. And thank you to all of the students and faculty members who showed up today to watch. So I'll just start off with everyone going around, introduce yourself, the panelists introducing yourselves, sharing your pronouns, and explaining what criminal justice work you currently engage in or what you've done in the past. So I think the best way to do this, I will call on each panelist, and just that way you can introduce yourself and I'll call you by your full name. So I guess we'll start off with one of our CC students, Sophie Carden.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. My name is Sophie. I use she, her pronouns. So some of the criminal justice work that I'm currently engaged in centers around voting rights. There's a group of students here at CC that's working to build a coalition of legislators and community organizations who are interested in restoring the vote to incarcerated voters in the state. And for me, that's one of the central issues of incarceration, is that I can't imagine that there's anyone more affected by the state policies than people in state facilities, yet they are the most disenfranchised population of citizens in the United States.
Thank you. And then if we would like to move next to Steve Handen.
I'm Steve Handen, and I have been a chaplain at the local jail for upwards of 50 years. The local jail is closed right now to programs, but we've done a lot of work also in the state prison system. I'm glad to see Dean Williams here. He's done a lot of really good stuff in the state system, stuff that's really helpful. I also currently operate 3 houses where we take in homeless men, and many of those men are recently out of prison, and of the ones that are recently out of prison, about 75% of those, or maybe a little more, have been convicted of sex offenses, and they're kind of a challenging group to find housing for and employment and that sort of thing. So that's what we do on a day-to-day basis, and we have contact with folks in both the state prison system and the folks in the county jail as well.
Thank you so much. And I just saw Juaquin join us, so if he's ready. Hi.
Hey, how y'all doing?
We're doing well. We're just starting off with some introductions. So if you would like to introduce yourself, share your pronouns and what work you've done with criminal justice, that'd be amazing.
Great, I'm Joaquin Mobley, he, him. I am the Vice President of Community Works. We work with CDOC as well as the state and the Department of Labor. What we do is help with the transition from prison to the streets. We do a lot of in-reach. And we do the Pathway to Homes grant as well as the Wages grant. And with that, what we're able to accomplish is streamlining the process for the individuals getting out, getting them to work, and keeping them out. Right now, we hover about a 2% recidivism rate, which is considerably low considering what the state has right now, with it being around 48%. So we're doing pretty well, and we continue to hope to, do the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much. Is Mike Siddoway here? I can't see.
Yes, I am here.
Hi. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. I'm Mike Siddoway. I'm a mathematician at Colorado College. And I'm primarily interested in, as far as the work I'm doing in teaching in prisons. I'm right now teaching a math course at the YOS prison in Pueblo. And I'm part of the Colorado College, Pueblo Community College and Department of Corrections effort with Alberto's, who's here, Professor Hernandez-Lemus, and Professor Carol Neal, and others at CC who are building a program that will hopefully prepare the students that we teach at the prisons. We're now involved with more than one prison, and we'll put them in position to have their basic courses, the core courses for an associate's degree at any community college in Colorado if they complete the 3 courses. But we have a suite of courses that we're trying to teach every semester and to build on that. And again, I'm currently teaching kind of halfway through a college algebra course that I'm teaching at the YOS prison in Pueblo. And it's, of course, entirely online right now.
Thank you so much. And finally, we have Dean Williams joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Dean Williams. I'm the Executive Director for the Department of Corrections here in Colorado. I've been on this job a little over 2 years. I came in with Governor Polis. He appointed me into the position. I ran the Alaska Department of Corrections for almost 3 years. I took over that system in sort of a troubled time. If you Google my name, you'll find lots of articles not only about me in Colorado, but about back there too as well. And yeah, thanks for having me. And I feel like I was telling Professor Neal that I feel like I'm coming home now. I really, our headquarters for our department is in Colorado Springs, and I really enjoy the opportunity to engage with you all around these issues around criminal justice, and specifically around the correctional system, the prison system, and reentry and parole. So thanks for having me.
All right, so I guess we can roll into our questions. I'll start off with the fact that CC students, as we all know, are very engaged and very passionate kids. And I just want to know what all brought you to this current line of work, what sparked your interest in criminal justice. So if anyone would just like to pop out, this is a very conversational kind of thing. So just feel free to unmute yourselves and answer the question.
I'll hop out there. So what brought me into this line of work is when I grew up, I seen a lot of my peers, my family members, get incarcerated, and when they were making that transition from prison back into the free world, they didn't have a lot of options. And as a result of them not having a lot of options and opportunities, it turned into a revolving door. Countless times they went in and out of prison, stemming from whether it was both of my stepfathers, cousins, aunts, everybody. So unfortunately, I went that path and I got in trouble. When I got out, there still wasn't any options. So I vowed to myself as well as my community to create those options. So through Community Works, that's what the steps we have taken, providing education both inside and outside. And also I opened a lot of businesses that hire people that were formerly incarcerated. That's like, and my business partners are all formerly incarcerated as well.
I can hop in. My interest in criminal justice work is similar. I watched all of the members of my mom's family go in and out of jails and prisons, and particularly one of the cousins I was closest to. So I spent much of my childhood writing him letters when he was in Colorado jails and prisons, and then seeing him when he was out and watching it happen all over again. So that's very much where my interest in this work stems from.
Thank you so much for sharing. Oh, Dean Williams.
Sure. Well, I'm an unlikely director in both states. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I had retired once already, and I ran juvenile facilities, and I worked in the DA's office for 5 years in rural Alaska, and I thought I had a great state government career. And honestly, what led me to this work is that I did an investigation for the governor in Alaska around the dysfunction of why people were dying in prison. But Alaska has an extremely high recidivism rate too, higher than Colorado. I always thought, like, who would want to work in these systems, let alone lead anything? Now, the irony is not on this, to this date, is not lost on me that here I am leading the state of Colorado, and I led Alaska's correctional system for 3 years. But what brought me to the work is, quite frankly, I had a tremendous heart change around the dysfunction I saw and in Alaska, and how deeply troubled I was by the conditions of confinement overall in the country. But also, I had a personal experience, quite frankly, with a family member who had died in the Alaska correctional system. I went to that village to apologize for the governor. I showed the video. And instead of hostility, I was met with hostility because she had every right to be completely angry and hateful around what had happened to her son. Her son had died in prison. In fact, I did one of the case studies. If you find that report, it's online, by the way, students. You can probably find that report that I wrote along with Joe Hanlon, a former FBI agent, around the dysfunction and the problems in the Alaska correctional system. But I was moved because that woman met the dysfunction with forgiveness and grace for me. And it moved me. And this was not going to be my retirement job. And certainly wasn't going to be my retirement job in Alaska, because I thought the system was so jacked up. Who in their right mind would want to lead it? Who'd want to work in it? And who'd want to dabble around the edges? And as Providence provided, I had an opportunity to lead and to try to make a difference. And I've never claimed of as the most qualified person to do that. I was just given the opportunity, and the answer to that opportunity just had to be yes. And I just felt convicted about it.
Thank you so much. Steve or Mike, would you like to share about how you got into your line of work?
Sure. Well, Steve is one of the reasons that I've gotten involved in this and other social justice issues, and that goes for Professor Neal as well. A place like Colorado College that has so many great teachers, I think people that are in a position to bring their gifts to others, that we should have a focus on bringing those talents and energies to those for whom in our culture are excluded. And I think there's no more excluded group of brothers and sisters that you can think of than those that are in prison. And I think that it's the kind of thing that colleges and universities, right after building programs, you should start to look outward and find ways to reach people that don't traditionally have access to quality education. And so it's what, I've had involvements in Chicago and in New Orleans before I came here, and the housing projects there, and in communities in Chicago, not in prisons until I came here. And the opportunity arose with Professor Neal's program at CC, and I just got involved with it as soon as I could, because I think it's what colleges like CC should be doing.
Well, I got involved in this maybe more than 50 years ago. I was a clergyman here in town, and people would knock on the door of the church house and needed a place to stay and needed food. It was before the days of shelters. It was before the days of food stamps and a lot of the other social programs that we have today. And I put together a few things that could hopefully help people. And we went through phases. I opened up a couple of houses at that time. And there was a lot of, for example, alcoholism on the street. That's before we had detox centers. That was back in the days of drunk tanks. They just threw them in the back of a jail someplace and let them throw up and get sick and do whatever they were going to do. And a little group that I formed came together, and we just started looking at people as human beings. And this is Bill and Tom and Susie or whoever it might be. And they had a history and they had a future. And so we just talked to them, we hoped, as persons. And as life went on, many years went on, different people knocked at our doors. We had people with AIDS back in those days. Nobody wanted to touch anybody with AIDS because they thought they were going to die or something like that. I don't know what, but mentally ill people had no place to go. Drug addicts had no place to go. It was just, there was nothing for those folks. And those are the people that knocked on our door. And in the last few years, the people that have knocked on our door the most have been people getting out of prison. And some people have been in prison a long time. And so we've taken them in, and they can stay at our house. They sort of get room and board. It's not we say it's not a retirement home, but they can stay. We've got people stay there for years. And we've developed kind of a good community of those people. They come back to visit us, and right now, the biggest part of our family, I guess, are people getting out of prison, and the biggest part of those folks are sex offenders. They have a real difficult time, and their crimes are bad, but they're kind of not the Ted Bundy kind of thing, where a guy goes out and robs and kills and rapes and all that kind of stuff. These are fellas that their fathers, uncles, brothers, their relatives, they're known to their victims and stuff like that. And we had a TV camera come and see us here a couple of years ago, and said, "Oh, this is really terrible. You're housing these guys." And I said, "Well, if you'd let me talk to you, you can come in and you can talk to these guys if you want to. But to put them on television and make it really a bad story that these are evil people living in your neighborhood, it doesn't help. Actually, if they're in our house, society is a lot safer because they're supervised in our house, and they have accountability and support and that sort of thing. And moreover, some of these fellows, a lot of them are trying to reconcile with their families, trying to even reconcile with their victims. And if you put this on TV, it doesn't help that. So the TV people, it was kind of interesting, went to the local police department, said, "Do you know that there's a house there that's got some sex offenders in it?" And the police said, "Yeah, we do. And we're really happy about that. And we wish there were 10 more houses like that, because we don't have to worry about the guys in that house." And they leave that house in a better shape than when they came there. So that's kind of what we do today. We're not social workers, and we're just sort of family members, I guess. We don't have any professional backgrounds to deal with the folks in a therapeutic way. It's more of a family kind of thing, and we find that the people that come to stay with us are, especially if they've been in prison for a long time, suffer from what's called now PTSD, and it takes a long time to get through that and get over that. The only thing we can offer at the house is some support system. We use a lot of other social services, but we don't have much ourselves other than just this family setting. So anyway, that's kind of what we do, and that's how we got involved in the prison system and the jail system. And I guess we'll continue doing that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all sharing that personal information of your background and how you got interested in the first place. I really appreciate that. And I bet everyone listening does too. So we'll move on to our next question. As we all know, we are in a very memorable time. We are in a pandemic. And so how has the coronavirus affected this past year for all of you? I know service work looks very different. Everything's virtual. So hearing what you have to say is, we would greatly appreciate it.
I'll kick it off again. As far as the organization, we were affected heavily. There was an influx of individuals coming into our organization. Seems like DOC was trying to move individuals out of the facilities, as well as the county jails. Those that were able to move out of there, as far as that were eligible for parole and or the halfway house. And as a result of that, we were kind of tasked with still trying to provide services for them as well as jobs. So with that in mind, we had a huge influx of individuals coming through our doors. So we had to, hire a couple of more people, and we had to double down on reaching out to our employers, as well as developing partnerships to get individuals into work so we can keep them occupied and busy and working and still going down the right path.
Thank you. Would someone else like to share?
Well, I'll jump in. It's had a profound impact on the correctional system, the prison system. If the country facing a pandemic, I mean, the word unprecedented has been probably now overused in an unprecedented amount. But the reality is that prisons are congregate settings. We built a system in the country. It's the high level of incarceration we do in our country, which if you're one of these students following this, right, you hopefully are doing work and studying around the rates of incarceration in our country versus every other developed nation in the world, right? And in many ways, how we are many times over incarcerating compared to other developed nations, to almost every other developed nation. And it's a horrible place to be if you have a pandemic. Prisons were not built to withstand the fire of a pandemic. And so it has upended everything that the major initiative I've had here in Colorado and as well as back in Alaska was trying to normalize prison environments, to try to convince not only the people who work for me, but the inmates and everybody else within the sound of my voice, that prisons can and should be different, because we know that other developed nations have done it differently. And guess what? Now states here in this country, we're starting to do it differently. And guess what? We're getting safer prisons. And if you do this right and show a trajectory on this, you have less recidivism rates, less returning to prisons. You have more people want to work there. So prisons are a horrible place to try to manage a pandemic. And it's upended a lot of my normalization efforts about making prisons a more humane, purpose-driven, rehabilitative in the real word, because that word rehabilitation has been used so loosely and so abused, quite frankly, it doesn't mean much right now. But there are ways of making this system better. I hope, though, all of you studying criminal justice is a major, look at that and understand that we need people coming up to these systems to help lead the next generation out of what we have created as a country. And so the good news is that even some of the work before we got to the pandemic, though, has created much better goodwill between officers and staff. And if we have time to talk about it, I'll tell you about, what's the most important thing Williams that we should know about a prison system? Well, maybe we'll get to that question, but the reality is that if you're in a prison environment and you have an outbreak in a prison environment, you're in trouble. And we've done amazingly well here in Colorado, but I've still lost 29 men. 29 men have died as a result of the pandemic of COVID. We've had over half of our prison population has contracted COVID. So managing, you can't social distance in a prison environment. We quarantine, we isolate, we try to cohort. There's all kinds of things we have done. And quite frankly, we've saved lives because our mortality rate's low. Comparison to how many people have been infected, we've done well. But if you're one of those family members, the 29 people who have died, we have failed for them, for those 29 individuals and their family members. And I talked to them, and so it's personal for us. And the loss of life is personal to us. And so there's a whole bunch of other places you'd rather be to weather this kind of crisis in terms of the pandemic. Prison is one of the hardest environments there is to manage when you have something like this sweep through the nation.
Thank you so much. We can move on to another person if someone would like to share and answer that question as well.
Yeah, this is a pretty concrete question for me. And the project that we have at Colorado College, we were hoping to kind of keep our kind of regular rhythm of a course each semester going. And I know that Professor Neal and Professor Santa were able to keep classes going, and Professor Hernandez-Lemus as well last spring. But we were kind of knocked out in the fall. The course that we had scheduled to teach was canceled because we couldn't, of course, go down and be there in person. Online capabilities are not what we're used to, for instance, at a course in CC. And then there's the difficulty that Director Williams mentions about just getting people together at the facility, right? That's a part of the problem. So we didn't run a class last semester. And interestingly, when the group was talking about, what we hoped to do in the spring that we're now in, asked if we could maybe teach 2 courses. That's where we want to get. We want to have more offerings every semester. But that was deemed not possible. But then they contacted us and said, could we run this algebra course, this college algebra class? And that was really great. Of course, we were hoping to have the course run, and it is now about halfway through. It's all online, and I'm hoping, even, this is the first time I've said it, I'm wondering if maybe later in the spring, now that I've got my shots and we can talk about all the safety, if it would be possible for me to be in person some way with the students. It really points out, though, the need for, we find a way, and we learn how to make technology work. I'm on a screen and the students see me. They don't have individual computers like we all have right here. There are lots of limitations just around, as there are when you're in person. But this is, lots of electronic homework and quizzes that are going back and forth and are graded. It would be so great to find a way to bring more computer capabilities to those that are taking courses in prison. At the YOS facility, there could be a way that students could go to a classroom that they each had individual access to a computer for that time. It would just be it would just make such a difference. And this is what I've been trying to think about in teaching this course. How could, so of course I want to be back with the men and women that I'm teaching, but there are lots of ways that we could blend that with online kinds of courses, or flex and hybrid like we talk about at CC, that would make more offerings possible for the students that we're working with. So it's been challenging, but really, it really shows the Department of Corrections, I think, commitment to education. They reached out to us. We were poised to reach out, like, can we do this? They jumped us a little bit on that. Said they contacted us, can we do this? It was so great. And now we're looking toward the fall. I know that CC is looking for options in the fall for courses.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Denise, can I chime in real quick? I'm sorry.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
Thank you. I also want to speak about our response during the COVID, with the whole trying to get into prisons and not being allowed to go in there. We've actually partnered with CDOC, and they're allowing us to deploy a secure app called the Community Anchor Academy, where we provide our training on there. And they're actually going to let us have a live video feed where every other Friday you can chime in if you're qualified to go through the training via our app. And you can go in, and they're buying tablets, right? Secure tablets, can't go out of them, can't go into any other website, but you can go into these tablets and you can watch the live trainings, or you can watch the already pre-recorded videos and take tests. When you pass those tests, your client manager, they're going to receive your certification. That's going to go into a folder for when you get out, you have those credentials, those stackable credentials and industry recognized credentials to help streamline the process with getting a job.
That's amazing. I may contact you after this and get more information on that to share with you all, just in case you didn't catch that. But thank you so much for sharing that. Before we move to our next question, Sophie or Steve, would you like to chime in?
I can chime in really quickly. One of the biggest challenges for student organizers is that we can't meet physically with each other. So a lot of student organizations who have been working on criminal justice issues, like the Prison Project, who I know has worked with many of you, hasn't been able to meet, and we haven't been able to recruit new students on campus as we usually would. And it's resulted in a very interesting online organizing community that I think people are still trying to figure out how to navigate. Some of our most amazing organizers are on this calls, and Denise, you're definitely learning in the middle of a really interesting time to learn how to do this. So I think for students, that's been the primary challenge. And we also can't work with community organizations as we normally would.
Steve, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Well, we've had a group of CC students for a long time who have come up to one of our houses to cook dinner once a week, and cook dinner and then have dinner with the guys that are in the house. And that's been a real good thing. And it's been good for the guys, and it's been good for the CC students. They get to mingle in a pleasant way. The COVID thing has slowed that down, but I wish we could crank it up again. It's just a good way. It's not dead, but it'd be nice to have it as full as it was. I know in our house, our population is a little bit down. Right last March, when this COVID stuff hit, March and April, we took in a couple new guys from Sterling, and that was one of the hotspots of this COVID stuff. And it was a real roll of the dice for us, but we made sure the guys were tested and did the best we can to make sure they were healthy when they came to the house. We don't have any place in our house to isolate people or to quarantine people. We'd have to really be creative, put them up on the roof or something. I don't know what, but it's worked out. But anyway, CC students have been a part of our deal for quite a while. And we're still an equal opportunity employer.
And Alberto, if you'd like to chime in too, that we would greatly.
Yes, and I hope what I'm about to say will come across the way that I mean to say it. I just got my second dose of the vaccine, and that's why I think I'm going to call it a day after I attempt to say something positive about the pandemic. It's positive in the sense, that one of my favorite characters in the Bible, Job, embraces whatever comes, and so I think this is this has been a wonderful opportunity to corroborate the humans' will to live and desire to continue to be alive and to thrive and to find beauty and so I was teaching a course at the La Vista Correctional Facility, a women's facility in Pueblo. We used to meet in this gorgeous classroom overlooking the mountains. And the course that I teach, I'm in the philosophy department at Colorado College, and the course that I teach is a course really on slowing down, analyzing literary text, and then writing about that text, and then allowing personal connections or personal observations, to enrich that analysis. So it's the course is called Reading, Thinking, and Writing, and so one of the things that students write every day is a poem, a short haiku, 3 lines, very simple. So we used to meet in this very gorgeous classroom, and that got to stop. Then we continued meeting on Zoom, and that was not the same, but we still managed to put together a collection of the reflections. And, I have some little booklet that came out of that was meaningful to my students. Then in the fall, we started the same program, but this time at Centennial with men, sex offenders as well. We met twice over Zoom, the students in a classroom, but soon that was not allowed anymore, right? To have the students congregate and watch me over the computer. So now we're doing correspondence. They write in their journals every day. Someone in the facility scans the work. I print it out. I mark it, and things are going so well. It's a demonstration of people's resilience. We roll with the punches, like with good old Job. We roll with the punches, and whatever comes next, it really hasn't phased us. It's a very small program, very modest goals. We don't even issue credits, so all the advantages of being small have been, I think, just one more hurdle, that these guys, in these men that I work with now, have encountered, and they're rising to the occasion and writing amazing literary analysis, and then writing their own creative pieces. So I would say that yes, it would be wonderful if I could be in the classroom with them again. But things have not been bad at all. They've been a lot of work, but they have been really good. And so I hope that we will be able to continue no matter what. So, and with that, I leave you. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you all for your great work. So, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I like the positive outlook that kind of the hope at the end of the tunnel, like we're doing something that is meaningful. Before we'll just jump to our next question. I feel like I'm going to jump to a very positive question since Alberto left us with a little bit of a positive outlook. And if Sophie, since you are going to be dropping out early, if you want to answer this first, that'd be great. So what does success look like in the justice system? Looking ahead, what does justice look like?
For me, I think one of the first steps is collaboration between organizers who are living outside of facilities and organizers who are living in them. I also think that movement towards a restorative and transformative justice system and away from a retributive system focusing on punishing or vengeance would look like success for me. And that goes for many levels. So it's not simply true of our federal and state systems, but also for systems of punishment at CC and in public schools, and sort of taking the carceral and retributive attitude that we bring into all of our spaces out of those spaces.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Dean Williams?
Well, it's a simple question with a very long answer, and I'll keep it short and hit the high points. One, since we're over incarcerating 5-10 times what we are with other nations, and we're still not any safer, we have to look at what we think we're doing every time we put someone behind the walls. And so the first thing is, do we embrace the fact that a restorative model or not, or a retributive model? Do we, I ask people that to get on this lane with me, to say that, because the country has viewed prison as a place of punishment, right? You go to prison to be punished. And if that was the goal, I would say we were doing pretty good, because we've made prisons dense. We've made it prisons in profound isolation. Colorado is one of the few states that basically has eliminated solitary confinement, by the way, but the rest of the country doesn't really, I don't think, struggle. I mean, we struggled, or my colleagues do struggle with solitary confinement, but the reality is it's widely accepted. And we've made prisons a harsh place to live, to the detriment of public safety, to the detriment, because the recidivism rate is such that when half the people come out of prison, go back to prison, that means half of those people are committing new crimes or doing other things to get back in trouble again, and hurting others and breaking into places and robbing stores and all kinds of other mayhem. And so success for me is not only reducing the recidivism rate, reducing the rates of incarceration, but the more immediate one, here's the big one, right? The more immediate one is to understand that prison has to be done differently. The head of UK prison system one time, and please don't hear me, so if you're running a program in the prison, don't take it wrong, but basically said, and I agree with him, I wish I'd used some of his words, that prison programs don't work. Now hear me carefully. Didn't say education doesn't work, because we have a lot of research around how education works. The point is that we have placed a whole bunch of money and effort into prison programs and ignored the basic structure of what happens behind the walls. If you make an environment stark, without hope, without purpose, where safety is in question, where you don't have a reason to get up in the morning, guess what? People get worse, and and prison programs have less of a chance to work, because we haven't dealt with the foundational problems of incarceration. You can't have a prison system where you think that people are being sent there to be punished. And the Scandinavian countries and Germany, and even my colleagues around the country, both conservative states and liberal states, we now have adopted this notion to try to unwind what we've made our correctional system in this country. And I'm not the only one. The good news is I'm not the only one who's thinking crazy like this, right? And we know from research that if you can make prison a more purposeful place. It's the reason why the Scandinavian countries went from 50% recidivism, like what Colorado is, and even higher in Alaska, my old state, and they're down to 25%. Do you know what that does in terms of increasing public safety? Do you know what that does in terms of saving money overall? And so we need a head and heart change on what we think prison should be and to reset expectations. And the first thing that Norway did 25 years ago when they changed their prison system was to say, we're going to develop a white paper, and you can find it online, English translation, of what prison should be. And they adopted principles. I don't have time to talk about all those principles now. I'll just tell you that they've seen results, and they have spread this around the country. So even countries like Ireland that have old antiquated prisons and old systems and densely populated, they've decreased their recidivism rate by adopting certain principles around the correctional system. And so that's one of the definite goals we should be looking at.
What do you think about the sentencing rules? I mean, it's like the common folk out there think that there's a magic to a sentence. If you rob a 7-Eleven store, you should get 8 years. If you do it with a gun, you should get 12 years. If you murder somebody, you should get 25 years. I hope nobody's taking notes on this here, but I've found in our system over the many, many years that the easiest people to deal with are murderers. The people that do this one time, it's an impulsive act. They're immediately sorry for it, and they go to prison for 40 years, something like that. I understand what society demands or wants, but it's kind of stupid sometimes.
Well, Steve, I'm speaking for Dean and not any.
Okay, that's who I speak for too.
Administration. A full disclaimer on this. The problem is, and those of you who've been studying this, right? If we knew that increasing sentences reduced recidivism, we'd be one of the safest nations in the world right now.
Exactly.
Right. And if we knew that long-term, so when you study, philosophical pieces of correctional systems or criminal justice, right? We're all looking for a deterrent, right? There are values in punishment, in deterrence. There's values in reestablishing norms. These are sort of guidelines around how do you set sentences, that sorts of thing. But many different states are all over the place in terms of their state sentences around what. Yeah. I've only been led another state system, but sentences here, and in fact, I'm part of a sentencing commission, so I have to be careful here because we're looking at a lot of sentencing laws. And so there's a lot of good things that my boss, the governor, I think is doing around sentencing and really trying to take a really rational look at it. The problem is that as a country, we have believed and bought into the lie that longer sentence. Now, you can incapacitate someone with a long sentence, right? I mean, they never have a chance to commit a crime again because they're sitting in prison for a long time, right? So there is there's a kernel of truth in that. The kernel of truth, but I think it's a deceptive kernel of truth. The kernel of truth is that if you incapacitate someone for long periods of time, certainly they can't commit a crime again. The problem is that even with long sentences, right? 95% of the people in prison right now or in my system right now are coming home. 95%. There's a very small number who are the lifers, by the way. And by the way, you're kind of right, Steve. They actually present some of the least trouble to us in terms of management issues because they know they're going to live the rest of their life in prison. And my job is to help them get a job behind the walls, to how to help and how to help younger people and how to be a mentor and how to do other things like that. Even good things for those individuals can still happen and they know it. They talk to me about it all the time, right? They need a life too. Even people who do heinous crimes when they're 20 years old and are going to spend 50 years with us need a life. Otherwise, prisons become unsafe and we continue to do damage to everybody else who's behind the walls with them. But those aren't really the problem, people. The problem is that we do a really good job of incarcerating and keeping people behind the walls. Not very many people, knock on wood, not very many people escape from our systems. The problem is my friends like Juaquin and others who have dabbled in this system, who've gotten involved in one way or another, even as a younger man. It's hard to find your way back to normal again. It's hard to find a way back to ever, many times men and women behind the walls, when they're getting out, and this is true for all kinds of crimes, but Stephen, as you pointed, it's very true for people who have committed sex offense crimes. They want to know if they can ever be forgiven for the thing they've done. Can I ever get back to where I was at before? Done my penance, done my crime, done the time for my crime. And all I want to do is try to figure out how to get normal again. And that journey back to normal is very difficult, you guys. And the reason why there's such a high failure rate. And those of you who've been working on reentry, and the system is, we have a lot of things to work on, and we have a lot of things to change. And all credit to my boss and others who are looking at some of these longer and excessive sentences that don't seem to make match. And certain states, if you commit the same crime, you get twice as much time in some states as you would in other states. I mean, it's pretty. The difference in sentences is very notable. The problem with the sentences, that does not make us safer. A longer sentence does not make us safer. If you have a belief in, hey, there has to be a penalty, there has to be a consequence, I agree with that. There has to be a consequence for criminal behavior. The issue, though, is longer sentences does accomplish incapacitating someone, but it does not, by its very nature, and especially in our systems in this country, make us any safer as a nation or as a state. So that has been, length of sentence has been used as the remedy to crime in our country. And there's a part of that is a small sliver apart that I do agree with, as I mentioned. But the bigger context of what happens when you put someone in a prison system and then try to put them back out again, it's a big deal. And we've missed that. And other countries and other states, and we're just asking better questions now. I think we have a long ways to go. But those are the issues of the problem with very lengthy sentences. We have the lengthy sentences down. We just don't have what it means when you get done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, sorry, I hate to cut. I love this conversation that we're having. But just to honor everyone's time, I want to quickly move into the Q&As and just ask the group if there's anything that people want to ask, questions at all. Feel free to chime in the chat box. Or if not, the panelists, if you have last thoughts to share, that'd be great too. But I do want to honor our time and make it to the 4 o'clock mark.
Just really quickly to answer the question that you asked Denise a few minutes ago, for me, it's to find ways. I have the same hopes for the students at YOS as I have for the students at CC. I want to help them get to the next best place in their life. And I understand, of course, that we have to do things quite differently. We have to start in different places with the students at YOS. But that's what I hope for, and to look for programs and ways of going about this kind of collaborative education to help the men and women at YOS and the other prisons that we're working in to get to the next best place and to be better positioned to have lives that are fulfilling for them and to those around them.
Thank you so much.
If I can chime in real quick. I'm sorry. For me, in my community, as well as community works, what it looks like for us is first establishing hope, right? And the way you establish hope, you give opportunities. But what we have to do is prepare all these individuals that are incarcerated for the opportunities, right? So whether it's trade school, which we're doing an apprenticeship with the prisons now, where individuals are going to be allowed to come out of the prisons and take part of an actual apprenticeship, whether it's tech literacy, all of that, that's what's going to make the difference for when the individuals get out, right? To Dean Williams' point, he mentioned that programs don't work. Speaking from lived experience, they really don't. Individuals that are incarcerated, when they're in these programs, their intentions are really just to get a reduced, good time. Well, increase their good time. It's not necessarily to take away from it because there's no opportunity there, right? It's literally the opportunity is I'm gonna get additional days taken off my sentence. Now, if we change that and shift that and we really focus on, okay, when you get out, we've prepared you to attack employment, as well as become, more self-sustaining, you'll see those numbers drop drastically. And with our organization, that's what we push. We give you a helping hand, but no handouts. And as a result of that, people feel more encouraged, they feel more confident, and they feel like they are in control, sole control of their destiny.
I think that's a positive place to end at. We have reached our 4 o'clock mark. I would just like to say again, thank you so much, panelists, for joining us. And for anyone who stopped in and watched, our video is being recorded, so we will also share this to other CC students and faculty members. But again, thank you so much for showing up today. CC really appreciates you all and all the work you've done.
Thank you, Denise.
All right, bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank